Welcome. In this lecture, we would understand local governments. Now, when we speak local government, the first thing that clicks our mind is the panchayat systems, the municipal systems, and therefore two important amendments acts, which are the 73rd and the 74th Amendment Act. 73rd applicable to the rural areas, 74th applicable to the urban areas, and this is what we would discuss in this lecture. Now, the first thing that we need to understand is what is actually the role of the local government. The most important role of the local government is to focus on the welfare of the local people, understand their needs, their common interest, and help them in decision making. This definitely involves solving their day-to-day life problems. For example, if there is a need for a road, a need for a school building, a hospital, issues against atrocities, domestic violence, environmental concerns, all those would be part and parcel of this local government's role. The next is the person who is elected for the local government must have information and idea about that region. So what are the traditions, the culture, the local interests, the local knowledge? Also, the funding is a major crunch for local government. Now, when I say funding is a crunch, that means there is around 4% of expenditure, which we would understand later in this lecture, but the local governments are able to earn around only 0.26%. That means a majority of it would come from grants. Now, when a majority of it comes from grants, what becomes important is to have the basic development, but at a minimum cost, and this minimum cost can be achieved through people's participation. So involving more people's participation in order to have a better result and have greater accountability and transparency. Now, there have been various stories for local government. One good story we would like to mention here is from Tamil Nadu, and this is from the Vengai Vassal village. Now, Vengai Vassal village is a village where nearly 71 hectares of the land which belonged to the region of Gram Panchayat was being allotted by the Tamil Nadu government. Now, in this case, the women panchayat who was there in the village actually raised the case to the court, and it was under a single bench judge. It was decided that the Tamil Nadu's government order is perfect, and this land should be given to the Tamil Nadu government. However, the women panchayat does not stop there. The women sarpanch did not stop there. She actually took the case to the division bench, and the division bench ruled out the single judge order and said that it is a constitutional violation of the panchayats, that the land of the panchayat is being assigned without the due permission of the panchayat, and therefore the order which was passed was reverted back, and in this way the rights of the local people of that village were protected for this 71 hectares of land. Now, this is just one example to cite. There have been numerous such examples. The idea is to strengthen the local government, is to strengthen the democratic setup. Now, how does this concept of local government all grew? So, it was back in 1882 under the then Viceroy of India, Lord Ripon, that the concept of local bodies was investigated, and the idea was percolated deeper that local bodies should be established. Now, when local bodies should be established, the concept started at the village level, and this was with the term panchayat. That means punch, 5 people working together, an assembly of 5 people who are working for the welfare. Then the Indian National Congress came in, and Indian National Congress took efforts to make local bodies more effective. In 1919, the Government of India Act was passed, and this established village panchayats across various provinces in India. Under Mahatma Gandhi, it was pleaded that decentralization is essential and that all development must have local involvement, and that is the key pillar for the local developments to be successful. If there is local involvement and decentralization, then definitely they have way ahead progress. So, two important things. One is decentralization. The second is participatory democracy. Now, another important thing is when a constitution is prepared, the local subjects are assigned to whom? They are assigned to states. So state actually takes care and brings in the required directive principles of the state policy, which are the directives to all the governments in the country. Now these DPSPs, which are directive principles of the state policies, are provisions which are non-justifiable and actually advisory in nature. So the main idea is to provide advice. However, local governments did not receive importance in the constitution. There were primarily two reasons attributed to it. First was that due to the partition, there was more unitary inclination. As a result, the local regions were left. Even Nehru believed that if there is a high level of localism, it could create a threat to the national unity. And therefore, creating a more centralized system was one of the reasons which led to declining importance of local governments in the constitution at that point of time. The other important reason was the founding member of the Constituent Assembly of India, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, believed that the society is highly caste-ridden, and when the society is factional and caste-ridden, it would actually reduce the real purpose of decentralization or bringing the local government at the rural level. So bringing in reforms in the rural area was important, but at the same time it was important that democratization must take place. Finally, there were various series of programs which led to establishment of local governments in India. The idea was brought under the 73rd and the 74th Constituent Assembly Amendment Act, and this was brought in 1993, finally came into force, brought into 1992, came into force in 1993-94. Before that, there were few developments. One was in 1952, Community Development Program started, and this focused on people's participation in the local area. Some of the states like Gujarat, Maharashtra adopted well to the local body election in 1960, but they realized soon that these local bodies do not have enough power. Later on, there was a proposal that three-tier Panchayati Raj system must be introduced in the local level in the rural areas, and after 1987, there was a thorough functioning of the local bodies or the local government that was initiated. In 1989, P.K. Thangan Committee was released, and this talked about constitutional recognition. So what it talked about was constitutional recognition for the local bodies. So P.K. Thangan believed that the local bodies should be constitutionally recognized and there should be efforts to establish them, and therefore this 73rd and 74th Amendment Act in 1993 were the foundation stones, because when in 1989 the idea by Thangan Committee was laid down to make them constitutionally viable, to bring in an element of uniformity. This was later in 1992 brought under the ambit of the Amendment Acts, which were constitutionally the 73rd and the 74th Constitutional Act. The Amendment Act, the 73rd talked about the rural areas, the Gram Panchayat, the village Panchayat. 74th talked about the urban areas, the municipal bodies, the Nagar Palikas. Now, another important thing was this local government was under the state subject, right? Now, when the local government was under the state subject, states were free to make their own laws. So, state had the power to make their own laws. Now, they were given 1 year time for making necessary changes with respect to the state laws wherever required. Similar case studies we have seen not only from India but from other countries. For example, Brazil. Towards the end of this lecture, we would talk about another case study from Bolivia. Brazil is a good case study. There, it is an excellent example of democratization. So there is a federal district and the municipal councils. So federal district and municipal council, each of them have independent powers which are assigned to it. The republic cannot interfere with the affairs of the state except if it is on the ground of the constitution, and they prohibit from interfering into the affairs. The idea is to protect the local authorities and the local powers. So let's talk about first the 73rd Amendment Act, and then we'll proceed with the 74th Amendment Act. Under the 73rd Amendment Act, the lowest level is the Gram Panchayat. On top of the Gram Panchayat is the Mandal, followed by Zilla Panchayat. The term for the rural Panchayat is 5 years. Now, if the state government dissolves it, the fresh elections must be conducted within 6 months. Now, Gram Panchayat, as I said, the group of Gram Panchayat forms the Mandal. Mandal is also known as the block or the taluka. Now, when the group of Mandal or the taluka collect together, they form the Zilla Panchayat, and Zilla Panchayat focuses over the entire district rural area. So all the rural areas of that district would be under Zilla Panchayat. Now in this Panchayati Raj system, 1/3 of the reservation is given for women. There is reservation for SC, ST. Also, if the state decides, the state can give the reservation for the OBC, the backward classes, but that depends exclusively on the power of the state. So if the state wants, state would do that. If the state does not, state would not do that. Again, there can be a combination. For example, there can be a woman and a sarpanch together. That means there could be a woman sarpanch, there could be an Adivasi sarpanch. So reservation along with the caste as well as the gender can run along. So there can be an Adivasi women sarpanch, for example. So that means all these reservations can run parallel or simultaneous as well. There are 29 different subjects which are taken into account under the 11th schedule. Again, these articles are discussed under Article 243G, where the powers, authorities and the possibilities of the panchayat are taken into consideration. Some of the major things that are taken into account is agriculture, irrigation, poverty, education, health, literacy, food, library, cultural activities, education, technical training, road and infrastructure. So those are some of the areas which are focused when we focus on the 73rd Amendment Act. Again, there are various Adivasi communities. So far, the provisions of the 73rd Constitutional Amendment were not applicable to the tribal areas. However, in 1996, a separate act was passed, and this extended to the Adivasi or the tribal areas as well. Right. The idea behind this is to maintain the local traditions in the local areas. Also, the state government would require a state election commissioner. Now, state election commissioner would look over the elections in the local region. Now, state election commissioner is an autonomous independent officer which is there for a tenure of 5 years, looking after conducting the elections of the PIR or the Panchayati Raj institutions. The next is the state government would also appoint a state finance commission. A state finance commission would be every 5 years, and this would talk about the distribution of the revenue and the local government between the rural as well as the urban areas. Clear? So that's again an important aspect that we discuss here. The next is the 74th Amendment Act. This is the act which is applicable to the urban local bodies. 73rd Act was applicable to the rural areas. 74th Act is applicable to the urban areas or the Nagar Palika. Now, what is an urban area? Three important things which are mentioned under the Census of India. Population of 5,000 or more. Population density of 400 persons per square kilometer. And the third important point is at least 75% of the male working force must be engaged in non-agricultural activity. Now, once these three conditions are met, we can define that region as an urban area. Whenever we define a region as an urban area, in that region we can say, okay, the 74th Amendment Act would be applicable. This would be a urban local body, and all provisions of 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act which is applicable for the elections are also applicable for the 74th Amendment Act as well. The only difference is that applies to rural areas, and this 74th Amendment Act applies to the urban areas or the Nagar Palika, and the functions are again listed under the 11th schedule of the Constitution. Since the implementation 1993-94, there have been around 4 or 5 elections so far. More are yet to come. The implementation of local government is important. As we have have seen local government, 1/3 of the seats is reserved for females. There is also a dedicated participation for SC/ST population that brings in a significant proportion of population. If we talk about statistics, there are nearly 500 Zilla Panchayat, nearly 2.5 lakhs Gram Panchayats, 6,000 blocks in the rural area. If we talk about the urban area, there are around 100 corporations, nearly 1400 municipal towns or municipalities, and 2000 nagarpalikas. Now with this, we have nearly 1/3 of the reservation for women. So at least we have nearly 200 women adhyaksh in the Zilla Panchayat, nearly 650 women in the Gram Panchayat, in the Nagar Panchayat region. There are around 80,000 Sarpanch. Out of this 2.5 lakh, I can say nearly 80,000 Sarpanch in the Gram Panchayat area. So that means there is a significant representation of women force. However, we can significantly note that at the national level, the representation of so many big figures that we are hearing here, the representation turns out to be only maximum up to 5,000. But that 5,000 representation, we do not have even 1/3 of the seat which is reserved for female. That means at the grassroots level, we are implementing the facts with higher proportion of representation for the female, but this representation significantly declines as we reach into the state and the national levels. Again, if we talk about the SC/ST population, SC comprises nearly 16.2% of the total population. ST comprises nearly 8.2% of the total population. Now, both of these would constitute a significant proportion in the rural as well as the urban area. As we said, the proportion of the spending is only 2.24%, which is the total revenue which is collected by the local bodies, but they require nearly 4% for expenditure. That means a majority of it comes through the grants. Now, if there is lack of funding, lack of grants, that means these local bodies would have to work at a minimum cost, but definitely they would have to provide something for the betterment. Another good example is Bolivia, which is classically cited for democratic decentralization. The interesting study about Bolivia is the local participation is very strong and the decentralization is very, very systematic. So Bolivia is divided into 314 municipal governments, and it is headed by mayors and municipal councils. Now municipal council is called as cabildo. Mayors are known as presidente municipal. Both of these are responsible for the decentralized process and they are elected every 5 years, similar to India. Now, Bolivia, the local government focuses specifically on two aspects. One is the health, the other is the education. Also, maintenance of infrastructure is a key. So, Bolivia, 20% of the nationwide tax which is collected goes to the municipality on a regular basis, and this is used for the development of the municipal regions. So, municipality also levies taxes. This could be in the form of property tax. This could be in the form of agricultural property tax, fiscal transfers on the various schemes, and so on. So Bolivia, as we said, is again a very close-knit example to India, which has done exceptionally wonders with democratic decentralization. So in this lecture, what we focused on was the process of local governments in India, the importance of 73rd and the 74th Constitutional Amendment Act, and how it reaches to the most important strata in the segment of the society with bringing proper representation of each segment of the society, which has to be and needs to be carried out at the national and the state level as well. So this was a very fundamental and an interesting session. More lectures on political science NCERT would be coming shortly. Stay subscribed for updates. If you have questions, feel free to post those in the comment section. See you again shortly.